Hi guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome back to my channel. And yes, today I'm in conversation with Mr. Dsilva. Now, if you are the one who likes movies like Veronica, Conjuring, Exorcist, Ghost, Booth, the Indian version, so if these are your tastes, you are going to love today's conversation because Mr. Dsilva, the Indian king of horror, is with me. So come, let us talk to him. So my first question to you, sir, is everyone has a different approach to fear and horror. What might be horror for someone may not be horror for the other person. So how do you draw that line of horror in your books which would encompass a vast audience?
So you are right when you say that horror is very subjective. Like what I am afraid of, somebody else may not be afraid of. So what we do is when I am writing a story, I do not know exactly what my reader will get afraid of. So I do not go in that zone, or I do not follow that line of thought. Instead, rather, I write about what will frighten me. So I think about what will create the heebie-jeebies in me. Like in the night, if I'm not able to write a scene, then I know that this is very good horror. So that is how when I'm outlining a story, or when I'm thinking of a conflict for my protagonist, then I'm always thinking about what will be the thing that I will be scared of, and what then. Because in that way I'll be able to do justice to it, because I'll be able to challenge my own fears, and that is how I write it. So I do not think about other people, because that is not how horror really works. It has to scare me first, and then I know that it's a good horror story.
Yes. Your level of being scared is very high.
Yeah, because it is very personal. I think horror, the thing is that there are so many people, and horror readers are very varied. Some people like gore, some do not, some like ghosts, some like supernatural stuff. So how do you strike a balance? So the thing is, I write the stories that I believe in. And then, they find their readers. Every horror writer is also different. So eventually we find our readers, we find the kind of people who like to read the kind of stuff that we are writing. And that is also being very honest with your work. Because then you're not, pandering to somebody else or someone else's sensibilities or their phobias, but you're writing about your own fears, your phobias.
So we have Stephen King, who is the king of horror, generally we say. So he writes horror which is from a Western perspective, and you write horror which has got a more of an Indian perspective. So how different is Indian horror from the Western horror?
See, broadly speaking, horror is after all fear. You have to evoke fear. That is what the genre is about. And fear is a very universal emotion. So people all over the world are going to be afraid of certain things. They are not going to be afraid of certain things. There is nobody in the world who is fearless. So horror as it is understood by everyone all over the world. But where the difference comes when we are talking about Western and Indian horror is the culture, or you can say the kind of stories that we have to tell. Like we live a different kind of life, and the Americans live a different kind of life. So for them, something that will be a part of their culture will be scary to them also. But for us, that may not be, because we do not understand what that kind of horror is. Okay, because we do not understand what that aspect of their culture is. So what I do is I write stories that are purely Indian, that are set in our setup. So I will have also it is about the urban lore, the urban legends, because the legends in every place are different. Now when we talk about Western horror, then we have zombies and werewolves. So these are concepts they have built over time, and then now they are being worked on, and they are coming down over the generations. But here, our culture, our lore is completely different. We have, the supernatural creatures that we have, like chudels and giants, and now it is very passe. But even then, our culture comes from there. We think about the bhatakti atma in a haunted building. So that is the stories that I like to write, because they are more close to us, our setup. Western horror also, it took the stride of being psychological much earlier than we did, because our horror has now become psychological. But the Western horror, even in the 80s, we had a lot of psychological stuff. In fact, the movie Psycho itself came somewhere in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken, Alfred Hitchcock. So psychological horror has been there since a very long time, and Stephen King's horror is also very, very psychological. He has got a very psychological way of writing and representing horror, as we have seen even in the recent movie. The book is quite old, but the movie adaptation was recent. Whereas here in India, psychological horror is now coming up, is now coming to the fore. So far, we have always loved straight stories. Stories like, our Dada and Dadi used to tell us in the nights to scare us into being good children. So that kind of horror is what we like more. We like things that are more direct, more relatable, and something that we feel that ये अपने साथ भी हो सकता है. So that kind of horror is what we like. Whereas Western horror is more of imagination. They are open to imagine and fantasize stuff which is not really there, but we want it more direct. We are less subtle people when it comes to horror.
So the horror which you write, do you believe that there is a possibility that such a thing can ever happen, or it is like a fairy tale in a modified way for adults?
Very interesting, actually. The comparison that you make of horror with fairy tales.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that every fairy tale has a horror side to it. If you dig deeper into fairy tales, in fact, one of my books that is coming up now is Ringa Ringa Roses. I'm writing, based on the nursery rhyme, some story. So that, of course, I believe that even our nursery rhymes as well as our fairy tales had a kind of a tadka of horror in them, which you have to explore. But now coming to your question. So first and foremost for me, I do not start like I'm writing a fairy tale. I do not start like that. For me, it always starts with a core idea. So I think of the characters later, I think of the setup later, I think of everything else later. The first thing that is there in my mind is a core idea. Like when I wrote the book Yakshini. Now Yakshini's story, how it came to me, it was because of a very tragic incident that happened in India. It shook our country. It was the Nirbhaya rape case. So when that happened, I was completely, I was very much affected by it. I read in detail how that entire episode had unfolded, and it gave me shivers, goosebumps. Being a man, I felt like, how a person could be subjected to such brutality. That sparked an idea in my mind. I thought that suppose this girl Nirbhaya, who was brutalized in such manner, if she had some power within her to fight back, if she had something, a kind of, maybe a Devi, an Atma or something was there inside her, and she could have fought back against those men, and she could have taken her revenge then and there. Then would society have pardoned the girl? Would society have accepted the girl after that? Because it has happened in our society that even when a woman fights back, the society does not accept the woman. The society brands her as a very, the names that are called, I will not repeat them because they are completely unmentionable. But that is the kind of thing that happens in our society. So this gave me a plot idea. I created a girl who fights back against the male-dominated society that she is in whenever she is, taken advantage of. And then what happens because of that? And how she fights back is because she has a Yakshini inside her, which is a demigoddess. And it also gave me that duality, the duality of being an ordinary girl, but at the same time having a demigoddess inside her. So what is that, the two beings in one. So this core, when it came to me, then I started building everything. Now this is not a fairy tale. I will not call this a fairy tale. This is something that has come to me from reality. And my characters are very real. So that is how I build my stories. Even with Maya's new husband, the story of a school teacher, living with a man who is actually a serial killer. He is an Aghori serial killer. So in the daytime, he is quite decently dressed like all of us. But in the nighttime, he practices all these evil rituals and he kills people. So, and the wife doesn't know it. She comes to know later in the story. So again, this is grounded in reality. So my stories, I need them to be grounded in reality. The core has to be very stark, very real. But then what direction they take, it is not, that is something that I don't control. I let my characters play in the world that they are. And having said that, I will say the last one sentence, that I believe that horror is the evil cousin of fantasy. So whatever we imagine,
Mm.
if you imagine something nice and beautiful, then that is fantasy. But if you imagine something that is twisted and evil, then that turns out to be horror. So horror and fantasy have actually two sides of the same story. So fairy tales, that's why I'm coming to that in the end. Fairy tales are nothing but horror flipped over. Or if you flip over fairy tales, you're going to get horror. That's what I.
Any personal experience which you have had with this genre of horror?
Not a very direct experience, but I grew up in a colony which was supposed to be haunted. This was in Mumbai. I am a Mumbai guy. So when this was, I think, the 80s and 90s when I was a teenager. Okay, so that time there were these rumors that this entire colony where you are, that is a haunted colony. It used to be a graveyard. So people used to be buried here. So we were very scared, to go to the backside of the building because that is where the graveyard was supposed to be. But there were times, because if you are living in the building, then there were times that you have to go all the sides. So when we would have to go to the backside after, night, it was extremely scary. So yes, sometimes people would say that, Atma bhatakti, but I never saw anything. But this is how no direct paranormal experiences for me.
Yeah. Do you feel horror plays mind games and you start visualizing these things since you write horror? Has ever an experience happened like you're looking in your dressing table and you feel that a woman is going to walk out of of the mirror, or something where you are looking at a wall and you feel a man is going to walk out, since your mind is so dedicated to this genre? So you feel it does play games with the mind?
It does happen. I do get these very vivid dreams sometimes. So when I'm writing, I'm not writing all throughout the year, but the days that I write a very scary scene, or I'm plotting something, or I'm talking to my paranormal investigator co-authors. I've got two co-authors who are paranormal investigators. One is Jay Alani, one is Sarbajit Mohanty. Both of them go to haunted places and they tell me their stories, and then I write them in books. So when those people tell me their stories and all, then my mind starts to think everything, out of the box and all. And those nights, I get these very vivid dreams, like I am in that haunted jungle or I am in that haunted factory. And I also get sleep paralysis attacks on those nights sometimes. What is sleep paralysis? When you feel like something is sitting on your chest and you cannot move. So you are awake, but you're not awake. So I get that kind of thing has happened quite a number of times. So I really get terrified in the night sometimes, but I know that it is not real. I know that it is not harmful. It is just an experience, an emotion which is taken to the extreme. It happens when you are so immersed in writing that horror. It is bound to happen.
You have been writing horror. Now, if you read thriller, generally it has got a template that there has to be a chase. So in horror, you feel there is a fixed template which is there, like there has to be a chase or something of that sort?
We do say that there is this three act structure, the beginning, middle and end, for stories. But I believe that for horror, actually there is no such structure that you have to work on.
Okay.
Of course, it helps you when you are plotting the story. Let me explain this a little bit. When you are plotting a story, you do think in the terms of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, even for horror stories. But then when I am actually getting down to write the story, when the outline is done and from the outline I am writing the story, then most times that outline that I prepared is thrown in the dustbin. Because the story takes a different direction because I feel that my characters, they suddenly become alive in the middle of the story. And then they start telling me, this scene has to go like this scene has to go like this. So then I lose control over them and they take over the story. And this happens a lot. In normal stories, in all genres except horror, the hero at the end of it wins. He goes home happy. There is a happily ever after. Horror is the only genre where we are okay if the hero does not win. For me, the heroes are mostly female characters and they do not win. Usually, in most horror films, that is it. The ultimate shock moment. That is what they are for. So this itself tells you that horror does not follow the same structure as every other genre. But while outlining, it helps us. That's it. But later on, no.
Okay. So my last question is this movie Stree came, which was a horror comedy, which was one of very rare kind of movies which we had in India of a horror comedy genre. You will write horror comedy in the future. You see yourself writing or anything of that sort?
The thing is, when three happened, since many of my books are also into adaptation, I'm talking to a lot of producers on a like daily basis. So a lot of them have told me that if you have a horror comedy story idea, tell us because we want to make something like that. So I have been also thinking, and there were a few plots in my mind, like okay, we can do this. But right now, nothing is touching me so strongly that I want to start writing it. When it does, I will write it. Yeah, I'm not averse to it. It's a good genre to play with. Horror noir is very fun to work with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, guys, we were in conversation with Mr. DESIlva. I'm sure you love that conversation and that topic of horror, haunted, ghosts, spirits. It's a topic which I love. So do share your comments, views. I'll be waiting. And yes, don't forget to subscribe and do tune in tomorrow. Why? Because Mr. DESIlva will be giving you tips, especially for aspiring writers, which is going to help you for sure. So see you tomorrow. What time? 7:30 p.m. And yes, do remember I post in videos 4 times a week, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. So do tune in at 7:30 p.m. Bye. Take care.